All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this first day of spring. We've got a pretty topical topic today. I am Melissa Moody, chair of the Carl Professional Development Committee, and welcome to our March Latte and Learn. Today, we're talking about guiding buyers from land purchase to construction. And it's going to be a beautiful weekend. So let's get to it. Our facilitator this morning is Josh White with Story House Real Estate. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning. Hey, thank you, Melissa, and thank you to everyone who's on our panel. I'll go ahead and introduce everyone, and maybe we can just give a quick synopsis on, where you are, what you do, and then that way everyone knows kind of where you're coming from, what perspective. Julia, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everyone. Julia Roberts, Fulton Mortgage Company, and we have all the CP loans anyone could ever imagine.
Great. All right, Megan.
Hey, good morning. I'm Megan Rogers with Farm Credit here in Charlottesville. Land financing is kind of our bread and butter. It's what we do a lot of. So I'm excited to talk about that today.
Great, excellent. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Brimmett.
Hi, I'm Christopher Bremmett. I'm a custom home builder with Bramante Homes. We specialize in building homes on our clients' land.
Awesome. Great. Well, so we've got some great perspectives here from not just a builder, but also lending and different lending tools that you can use. So kind of our goal for today is to help identify like risks, costs, getting people from getting a piece of land under contract to actually building something on there. And whether that is they're buying it or they've already got it and we're trying to facilitate them getting an improvement on that parcel. And so let's just start with kind of an overarching question. This is for any of you guys on the panel. What's maybe the biggest misconception that buyers have about buying land and building that you run into from your seat?
Personally, for me, as having pre-approved people for a purchase, they don't even think it's ever an option that they can go with a realtor to buy land and work with a builder. They just they don't understand the process, so therefore they don't think it's attainable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Christopher, what about you? What do you see as far as like buying land and building?
Maybe the opportunity that can be had, it's a lot more work and it is more time, which are also things that maybe people don't always understand. However, you can be guided from the initial concept through construction. And oftentimes when you develop that parcel yourself, you end up with a little more equity right when you move into it.
It's good. It's good. Well, yeah, so kind of step one is you assemble your team, right? So if you've got a client who is looking at land, you as obviously as the agent are helping them look for that. And you want to connect them with a lender, a builder. When should buyers assemble their team from y'all's perspective? Maybe Megan, speaking to your perspective on when is the best time for everyone to kind of come together in the deal.
Yeah, I think as early as possible is the goal. I think it's important to talk about what their plans are. Like if they're planning to build right away, then definitely having all of, their pre-qualification for construction and the builder all lined up before they even, purchase the land is a great thing. Or if their plan is a little bit longer, then maybe that's a different discussion, but always as early as possible.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, so once we have our team set, we're looking at kind of our due diligence period, our financing period once we go under contract. I think from the realtor perspective, obviously buying a parcel of land, there's a lot of extra questions that come into play, like what is the zoning? What are restrictions on that parcel? Is it buildable? And so that's one of the questions for you, Christopher, like what determines whether land's buildable? And I know that's probably a loaded question.
Well, I have this really long list here. Um, and I'm not trying to be cheeky, but there is a lot to consider, and it can vary based on the county or city that you're working in. There's certainly the zoning consideration in Albemarle County. all the flat land, well, everywhere, all the flat land is picked over. So you'll find more land that's steep, or maybe near streams or creeks that have stream buffers. Albemarle County has some engineering requirements that can be a little more stringent than other areas. So we think about that. We think about utilities. We think about length of driveway, how much trees are we clearing. These are huge variables that, really are not always thought about as part of the house construction itself. But they can move the needle way more than you think as a percentage of total cost for the home. So I think a lot of builders in this area, we're lucky to have builders that are willing to get involved with clients as early as they are. There are usually not gates to hiring a builder to get at least kind of an overview of what do we need to be thinking about and taking care of before we write this offer. Study periods are easy to get into a contract in a buyer's market, but harder in the seller's market. So, more than ever in the last few years, we find ourselves giving clients that guidance before they write the offer because a study period may not be feasible. Uh, Geographic information systems. These websites that the municipalities put together can be very helpful for a builder to quickly preview some limitations, but a lot of the other considerations can take some time to figure out. Are we dealing with well and septic? Are we dealing with public water and sewer? Um, in addition to the other things I've mentioned, do we have an ARB that has rules and requirements that are going to drive the price of the home as well?
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So there's a lot of variables when you're working with land, and like you said, study periods are so important. From the land loan perspective, so let me go to you, Megan. Like a land loan, how does that different from a traditional mortgage? And then we'll jump to Julia on more like construction to permanent too. So,
Yeah, I think there's kind of a spectrum of people's understanding of buying land, and some people think that the loan should be very similar to the mortgage. They're expecting, to put 5% down and get the mortgage rate, and then there's the other spectrum of people who think that land financing isn't even available. So I think it's great if the realtor can talk to their buyer, kind of set their expectations, tell them there is financing available. They might have to put a little bit more down, depending on their financials and what their, term length they're looking for is. And, that maybe set them the expectation that that interest rate might be a little bit higher. I think sometimes it's a little bit of a misconception that the land loan should be easier to qualify for because the purchase price is lower. And that's not always the case because if you're buying land and you're not building right away, we do still have to include your rent payment in that calculation for your DTI. And, again, the term lengths being shorter or the interest rate being higher, sometimes that makes it a little bit harder than, a mortgage to qualify for. And credit scores sometimes have to be a little bit higher. I saw a question come up. I can only speak for Farm Credit. If they want a 20-year term, then we require 20% down. If they're okay with a shorter term and it's more of a lot that they're going to build on soon, we can do only 10% down. So 25, I think, is some lenders' requirements. But again, just setting the expectation that there might be a little bit higher down payment is kind of important.
great, great, excellent. Julia, what about from like the construction? Once we've got the land, we're going to use that as collateral for construction to permanent, and then also down payment for that too.
All right. So a lot of times the down payment that they use for the land, which is usually always required at some point, like Megan said, so that also transfers over to the construction loan. So that's equity they've got in the total deal. So when we look at it, of course, what we will do is once we approve them for the construction loan, get the build contract, know the price, add that to the land. Of course, that's the total value. That's what we would expect the appraisal to come in for, the value of the land plus the value of the home. Anything they've paid down or paid toward the land while they've had that loan, of course, is equity already established as part of quote unquote their equity or down payment into the construction loan.
Excellent, great. Um, so let's keep going on the idea of land loan versus construction loan. So, like, let's say you have a client who has land already, they're coming to you to like shop builders, or they want your help as an agent to kind of guide them through the process. When does that land loan turn into a construction loan, Julia? When would that happen?
So, as you all can well imagine, and Christopher can talk to this more, builders are sometimes a year or more out before they can start a project because they have a pipeline like the rest of us, and they're very tight with their scheduling. So normally, if again they've got their land, they've talked to a builder, the builder's going to put them in their pipeline to when they know they can start, and then we in turn back into their pipeline, right? So we are going to again set that up for them, get them pre-approved. And again, going back to down payment, normally if their land, and normally, and I'm going to preface everything I say today, everything's different for every single customer. So
Sure.
we are talking in such generalities
Oh yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to treat each client differently. Um, but normally the down payment on the land can sometimes be sufficient for the entire construction loan, right? So we can do them up to 95%, our construction loans. And that's 95% as the as completed price. Okay. So we're going to fund and pay off the land loan, leave the rest for construction.
Hmm.
Um, does that kind of answer that question?
Yeah, and I think your point is very valid. Like I think all three of these professionals we have on here, and we were talking about this before this session, is like it's so important to sit down and talk through each scenario with your clients and connect them with the right professional. I think everybody who we've got here is really good at that, and trying to guide them to what's best for them. Let's stay on the construction loan for just a minute, and I've got a question for you, Julia, and then for you, Christopher. um, like how does the construction loan work differently? I know like draw schedule,
Mhm.
etc. Like maybe explain a little bit of that. And then I'll shift gears with Christopher.
Yep. So the way I refer to it with folks when they come in, I'm like, it's a lot more pieces and parts to the construction loan. Purchase, pretty straightforward. But with the construction loan, again, you've got your land, you've got your builder, you've got your contract, right? And so once that comes together, we're going to again put the construction funds into what would be called like an escrow account. And what happens is, as the builder is building the house, normally every 30 days or certain milestones, I'll call them, the builder will come back to us and request an inspection. We will send our inspector out, and this is not the county inspection, this is for the bank. So we're going to send an inspector out. We're going to see that what's being done is to the contract plans and specs, and then we're going to pay the builder on what's completed. So, again, it takes the risk kind of away from the client, and reassures them that things are being done. Now, we definitely tell our clients we're not looking for color matches, flooring matches. We're not out there to do, an assessment based on, selections they've picked out. We're looking for the builder to perform and build the house per the plans. So again, they'll do those draws throughout the construction process. As they take a draw, they will be paying, in our world, interest only on whatever is outstanding each month on that. So their payment will go up each month as the build go process goes through. So their interest payment's going to get higher and higher. Now they are locked into an interest rate during construction. So we can always estimate what those payments will look like for them, minimum, maximum. But again, everybody's different. Every builder works a little different on their draw schedule. And so you just try to set expectation based on you knowing the builder, how they normally ask for the draws. It's some builders it's flat 5 draws, and we kind of know the progression of the house build, so we can estimate that for them pretty good.
Great, excellent. Yeah. Christopher, kind of piggybacking off that, yeah, what kind of how do you interact with the lender? What information is critical for you as the builder as you're approaching kind of the lending situation too?
Yeah, I want to jump in, and I wrote that question down. If you'll humor me for a minute, I want to build on what you
Of
said
course.
about the team that we've assembled here. I mean, Megan and Julia represent the majority of the purchasers that we work with, in addition to some others in the community, but it is a vast majority. And so, and I also wanted to touch on, that segue from a land loan to a construction loan. In order to go to construction, we need the complete contract, which has the price, but it also has plans and specifications because that contract with the plans and specifications are what populates the appraisal of the home on paper, and that's a critical component for being able to move into the construction loan phase of the build. Um, Working with lenders, we do ask our clients early on. Sometimes we send clients to the lender. Sometimes the lenders send clients to us. Obviously, the realtor relationship matters as well as our own marketing activities. But we always want to learn who or guide the client towards lenders, and we want to have conversations with them early on. The reason we love working with Megan and Julia is that they understand how we work and we understand how they work. We can talk about contract type, whether it's fixed price or cost plus. We can talk about draw schedule. And oftentimes banks require vetting of the builder itself. So these are all the reasons why you can't start these introductions too soon.
Excellent.
Can I
Great.
hop in there,
Yes,
Josh?
ma'am.
Because
Of
Christopher made
course. Please.
a
Yeah.
good point on vetting the builder. So, we are very particular, and you'll understand why if you all have been in the business for a while. A lot of folks want to get into the construction business sometimes. So, we vet our builders, and when I say that, it's not Chris will tell you it's not a huge process, but we ask for, license, insurance. We want an information sheet. Who do you have credit lines with? Whether it's Better Living, what vendors are your suppliers? What banks do you work with? We also are going to check to make sure they have no complaints with the Better Business Bureau. So we do that on a 2-year rolling. Sometimes we let builders go a little bit longer than that, but we do keep an eye. And again, we're just trying to take some of the risk out of the client's perspective, because the cheapest deal is not always the best deal, right? And so it's important that, and we'll talk about that here. What Christopher's speaking to is communication. What I tell my clients is whoever's involved in the transaction, realtor, builder, myself, it's so important for us all to communicate together and keep that communication going during the construction period to make sure there are no missteps and no one feels like they did not know something when they needed to know.
It's great. Yeah, you can hire a roofer, or you can hire a guy with some shingles floating around in the back of his pickup truck, and you kind of get what you pay for. So that's good. Well, that's a great segue to budgeting, costs, surprises, kind of the buyer side, the client risk management, if you will. So, what costs do buyers typically underwrite on these types of things? And like for example, Christopher, I'll go to you. Like for site work, utilities, those sorts of things. How does that maybe play out? What kind of hidden costs are there in the build that maybe we should be aware of as agents when we're um, advising buyers?
I think that for a long time we understand that until we put a shovel or a digger, an excavator in the ground, we don't know what's underneath that ground. And rock for a long time has been a big unforeseen, certainly high water tables, um, the presence of what could become a risk of water in the basement or the crawl space. Um, when we're drilling a well, we don't know where, when, at what depth we're going to hit water or if we're going to hit water at all. Oftentimes, and in Albemarle County, this is the case, you need to drill your well before they will give you a building permit to start construction. But there are other cost drivers and I think unforeseens, especially in this post-pandemic. Charlottesville is a community of what feels like embellished scarcity. And it's all a part of our housing crisis. People can't afford to live close, where the cost of construction includes travel or expensive local living costs. and there aren't enough workers. So I think two more things that are uncertain are weather impacts and delays to construction. We've seen more weather in the last 2 years, slow construction, than we have in a long time. This sleet storm, our jobs that we were able to shovel out really quickly, we had workers there immediately because there were so many other job sites that they couldn't get to. And we had another job site that was up on top of a mountain that we couldn't get to. And we didn't do any work on that house for an entire month. So I think weather can cause huge unforeseens, and labor shortage can cause big unforeseens. There was a time when we could build a 3,000 square foot house with all sorts of gingerbread in 4 months. Now it takes 16.
No, that's really good. Yeah, there's just general surprises like supply chain. I know how has that gotten a little bit better post-COVID world?
It is better. I don't think we've had such sharp demand I mean, certainly there are lead times. We are ordering windows and doors, shortly after signing a contract. But there was a time when we were ordering appliances before we had a building permit because they were going to take a year to come in.
Yeah, good,
But not the case like that anymore.
good. Megan, question for you. Same kind of idea. Any kind of surprises, budgeting considerations when somebody's buying a piece of, raw land or maybe even a farm or agricultural parcel that you guys would underwrite? I know appraisals for those can sometimes be a little bit confusing for folks as well.
Yeah, I don't I love land closings. They're so easy compared to home closings. So any realtor that's done both would probably agree. They're usually pretty simple. We do recommend that, like, if you have a client who's been pre-qualified for a mortgage, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're pre-qualified for a lower purchase of land, like we kind of touched on. So I would recommend, that that's something that can maybe pop up. You think they're pre-qualified, but that lender doesn't do land or, whatever. And same with high acreage, estate type properties, just making sure that the loan that they're qualified for actually meets the property that they are wanting to make the offer on, I think is one thing that can sometimes pop up. But no, otherwise, I mean, there's no home inspections for land, no, it's very quick. It's easy, no insurance requirements. So usually those are easier. But I think something that just always bothers me is I don't ever want to approve a land loan for somebody who then can't qualify for the construction that they want to do. So that's why if they do know that they're going to build, even in the next 5 years, just talking to a builder, making sure that what they want to build meets the land and meets their, budget is something that I always want to make sure happens. So if the realtor can help have that conversation as early as possible, then that's even better.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think back to the idea of like assembling the team as fast as you can, and Christopher's point about even if you don't have a study period, still getting builder eyes on the land. I mean, I think it's always better to go into the land search with a builder relationship if you can go ahead and get your clients to that point. Sometimes it's not possible, but they can definitely see the land in a different light than we can. So that's really helpful. Let's talk a little bit about like change orders, Julia. Like, if we have a deal, Christopher and Julia, we have change orders that are coming into play. We've got the draw schedule. Maybe talk a little bit about that. How that works in the overall equation too.
So if I can start, because I want to go back just a tad bit.
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Um, so one thing we didn't talk about is builder deposit. So we talked about down payment money and those likes. And I said, well, maybe the land loan has enough equity in it to be a down payment. But what we haven't touched on yet is that builder deposit. Most all builders, and if they don't, they should always ask for a deposit when they sign a contract with a client. So a lot of clients think, oh, I own my land, I've got equity in that, let me go find a builder. And what they don't think about is as soon as the builder starts working with them, that's time and money on their books, right? So, if they are going to get serious and want to sign a contract, as Christopher stated, sometimes they like to be way ahead, applying for building permits, doing soil studies, whatever they need to do with the county. So therefore, that takes seed money. And I always tell clients be expecting to pay a 5 or 10% deposit to your builder when you sign that contract, because that's going to get your project going. If your builder has to wait for me to close the loan to be able to give them a deposit, that's going to delay things for them. And it's more risk for the builder, of course, because they've got to get to closing. And again, they've spent time and money with that client. So just a little bit about builder deposit. The other thing, land loan pre-approval. So many realtors email me and they're like, my client wants to buy land. Can you give me a pre-approval for a land purchase? And Megan, I don't know how you all work. We don't do land loan pre-approvals. What I do normally do for my buyers is I will pre-approve them for, just like I would for any mortgage, the maximum amount I can get them, which would include their land and their build. And I'm going to send you that pre-approval, which would include the land cost. Even if they're not going to build now, as Megan was talking about, that's how I'm going to look at this. They're going to want to build. Yes, this is what they can afford, okay, which will include the land. That also gives the client a good indication. Okay, I'm paying 100 grand for my land. I'm approved for 500,000. That's going to give me a $400,000 budget plus any cash I'd want to bring.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there just to share that we can do the same thing, especially if they we know that they're building right away. But we also offer land loans where we don't require that they build. Like they could be buying ag land or investment land that they just want to hold on to next to their house or whatever. So we do also do land approvals without that. So that's where I guess I don't want to. Sometimes people aren't fully honest when they're talking to their lender, which or they're not sure. They're like, no, I don't plan to build, but then their plans change. So that's where just having as many conversations as possible, because we do offer land loans without the without building later. So that's where I hate to approve somebody or close on a loan and then they come back in 6 months and want to build and it's not something they can do. So anyways, but yeah.
Great. That's great. And Julia, I think your point about that budget process with the way that you guys do it is awesome. Like that way, we're not kind of chasing them around, showing them parcels that then they're going to build a house that, or Christopher's, going to quote them something that's going to be way out of their boundaries for that. So I think starting with that process of just knowing, obviously we always start with pre-approval, but trying to get an idea of the budget for the land because it's a little bit more slippery, I think, sometimes for folks when I talk to them. So, okay, great. We're going to get to questions in a little while. We got some good questions that are coming in on the chat, but we want to kind of keep going. Let's talk a little bit more. I'm going to skip down to maybe risk management and some practices for for us as agents, but also for you guys as the professionals who we're working with and on our team. What contingencies maybe are critical when we're looking at land, both from the lending perspective and from the builder perspective? I'll let any of you guys answer if there's anything you highly recommend, or again, a lot of these things, as Julia said earlier, are very general, so this is going to be situational, but maybe things you guys have seen from your perspective.
I
Josh,
think
are we talking about contingencies like study periods and financing
Yeah, we've talked
contingencies?
about a little bit. Yeah, but exactly. But anything that you're like, hey, I always kind of advise people this is a good, rule of thumb or a good practice, for making sure that you're protecting your clients, that sort of thing.
So I will say this, and again, we're talking very general here. If folks don't have cash on hand, building's probably not something they want to do. This is not for the first time home buyer who's looking for 100% financing, only because, and we kind of sipped over it, change orders happen. You've got, the worst thing I can do is set my client up and he end up or she end up having a change order and can't pay for it at the end, right? So, people that usually are buying land and building, it's not the first time they've thought of it, right? Maybe it's been a pipe dream, but they've so they need to have reserves, and maybe that's a 401k. I don't know, but I do recommend that these folks don't come into this, and without having reserves of some type.
Yeah, and I'll build on that. I mean, I think Julia, you nailed it on the head there. It is very different than purchasing a pre-sale in a community that's got, 20 homes under construction at any given time. It's more time, it's more money. Um, it's a lot more work for the client too, but it's not that they're not getting great guidance from their realtors, their lenders, and their builders, but it is more, and they need to be prepared for that. And it's certainly part of our process. We're just like the lenders are vetting the clients, we are too. We want to make sure that it's a good fit and that it'll finish as strong as it can start.
That's great. That's good. Okay, question for all the panelists. If realtors remember one thing to do differently when guiding land to build buyers, what should it be? Maybe what pitfall should we avoid or
I'll go back to having um, them with a good perspective. And again, Megan's hit on it, I've hit on it. When folks are looking at land, ultimately they're looking at building, right? So set them up with just with like anything, a pre-approval process where they know what their budget is. And if they look at that lot for 200,000, they're going to have to build a $300,000 home on that. Is that what they really want to do? Is that in their best interest? I think again, um, a lot of people in an old saying, they've got a champagne taste on a beer budget. Okay. And so things cost a lot more if you're not used to pricing, sinks, countertops, faucets. Things are expensive and it all adds up really quick. So getting them with a good understanding, again, even if it's going to be 5 years out, yeah, they may be saving more money, have more money, but at least today they've got a concept of what they can afford and what that payment looks like today.
it's great. Yeah.
I think a potential risk is, oftentimes people will bring us a set of plans. Maybe they purchased online and they'll say, how much does it cost to build this house? And a set of plans is nowhere near enough information to determine how much it's going to cost to build that house. We've already talked about the land things, the length of the driveway. Are we clearing trees? Are we buying a septic system instead of a sewer connection? But writing specifications and detailed scopes of work are a very critical component to ensuring the builder understands the scope of the work and that the client is getting a price that reflects everything that they want or need to have inside that house, inside that plan that doesn't have any of that, what doesn't have most of that information in it. So we're talking about making tile selections, hardwood floor, paint colors, amount of trim. Are we using custom built-ins? Are we using the affordable cabinets or the expensive cabinets? And you have to have these conversations on every line item. Some builders will start with kind of a default fit and finish that you may be able to go see in their model home, if they offer something like that. Um, but then you want to, if you can, to the extent that you can, price, your customizations above and beyond their default sooner than later. Because some people find themselves in construction, and being very surprised that, a really ornate steel table base, is custom welded and, comes with a bigger price tag than they're expecting.
I just want to jump in real quick to go back to your other question about the contingencies.
Mhm.
With the lot purchases, a lot of times I guess if you know your buyer is planning to get financing and only wants to do the purchase if they're going to get financing, I would make sure they have that financing contingency in the contract because we do sometimes at Farm Credit get cash contracts and people have cash to pay for a lot, if it's not a super expensive lot. But if the loan falls through, then, they're on the hook. So if they want, even if they have the cash, I guess, if they only want to do the purchase, if they have financing, I think that's a good contingency to include in the contract, just from what I've seen a little bit.
Excellent. Very good. All right. Well, and Christopher, great point about infrastructure too. We didn't get into infrastructure as much. I mean, when you talked about driveway, utility cost, I mean, obviously there's well, but also septic, whether it's engineered versus conventional and the delta that can change there and budgeting for some of the things that people don't really want to spend money on. Like it's not the things that you're going to see. It's all the like things behind the wall, so to speak, or, under the ground. So Let's move into some questions from the group here, and I'll just kind of roll through these, and these are open for anybody. We've kind of answered a little bit about down payment. Um, when we're doing a land loan as part of a construction loan, is it two closings? That was one of the questions.
So, we can do it, and Megan can answer for her, but we can do it one of two ways. We can do, as Megan said, if the builder's not ready, and the seller can wait, I always try to roll it into one closing because it's going to save you a closing, right? But a lot of times, if your builder's not ready, you're going to have to do your land closing and then again roll that into the CP. So it's different based on, again, if folks are planning, they've got their builder in place. Normally, it's two contracts: a land contract and a build contract. It's one close.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, and we can only do one close if you're ready to build right away. And I don't know if Fulton is one, but I know there are some companies that can do it's kind of like an extended fixed rate. So they can do a 1 year land loan that then automatically turns into construction. And that's a great option for a lot of people. But I would just caution that if your plans change, like if you're moving, you're retiring and moving, are you sure that's going to happen in 1 to 2 years or whatever that term is? So, but yeah, they definitely have options there regarding one or two closings.
Okay, great. Awesome. Um, Question about draw schedules and inspections from the bank side. Obviously, this is the bank inspector that comes out to ensure that this work is done. Is that paid by the purchaser each time that the inspector goes out, or is that wrapped into the loan? That was a question.
So that's part of closing costs. So on our particular loans, we collect $1,200 upfront in the loan as part of closing cost. Usually those inspections are anywhere from $100 to 150, depending on the inspector in the house. Anything that's left over, because believe it or not, some builders do 3 draws. Some builders do 8 draws. Some builders do 12. You never know. So we only charge them for the inspections that are done. We invoice those. And when we move from the construction loan phase to the permanent, when we do what's called a modification, anything that's left over will pay the principal loan down.
Excellent. Great. Okay. Lending conversations and different types of builds. Modular versus custom. Can you speak to the different maybe lending requirements, or if it's similar, or this is open for any of you guys?
So, Megan, do you all do modulars? I know we do.
We do modulars, mobile homes, yurts,
Yeah.
whatever.
So I will say again, everybody's different, everything's different. The big hot topic right now is the barn dominiums, right? So when the contract, and Christopher is specific on this, the contract plans and specifications are what we've got to look at, and we've got to see what the builder needs and what that house is going to be. Most modular builders want the modular paid for when it arrives on site, right? So we as the bank will have an inspector in place when that modular arrives that day. And when it is set on the foundation, we pay that modular builder, which is usually separate from the contractor who's going to finish the house. So that's a modular. Of course, every company, double wide, single wide, modular, everybody has the way they want to be paid. So that's a conversation that the lender's got to have with that contractor, that builder, way before we get to closing, right? We need to know how that's going to happen. And those modular builders usually want a hefty down payment. We do log cabin financing or log home financing. Those log cabin manufacturers normally want a huge deposit up front from the client. So again, everybody's different. Every situation is different. You really just have to hone in on your client, what they're looking at. And I guess the other thing I would say is we find are your clients all over the place. They don't know what they want. They're looking at log homes. They're looking at modules. they need to kind of figure out what route they're going to go. Um, they need to do their homework. They need to go figure this out with their budget. And then once they kind of, I guess, go through that funnel and narrow it down, then that's the time for a more deep conversation on how's this going to work.
Great. Christopher, how long typically is your discovery process, like average time? And again, this is a loaded question, I'm sure, but like if you really had someone who's dialed in.
Well, and I want to answer that from two perspectives. As a realtor, making sure that a client is vetting the land to be buildable and to make it a wise decision to purchase it. We can usually answer all the questions necessary to inform moving forward within 30 days, sometimes less, like a week or two, and it varies greatly. If it's hilly, if it has a lot of trees, we might want to figure out more of those hard to determine pre-construction costs first. But yeah, so 2 weeks to a month, I think is my answer to be confident moving forward with a purchase. But to plan and build a custom home, I think builders' approaches are different. Sometimes they're a design build firm offering that design in-house. Other times you may be working with an architect. Sometimes the design is complete when we meet the client, sometimes it's not. We are a design build firm, so I'll speak more to our process like you asked, Erica. We we recommend about 6 months for architectural design and 9 months overall to plan to be able to start the home or apply for the building permit. Um, we can typically apply for the building permit a little early, the way that our contract is structured, so that by the time the appraisal comes back, the loan is in place and ready to fund construction. We have that permit. Um, we have some clients right now that are planning for a summer 2029 occupancy, which gives us plenty of time to plan and get them in our funnel, but we also don't want to start too soon. So client's own schedule can affect that 6 to 9 months. Sometimes their ability to answer questions and finalize a design can make things take longer. But that's our rule of thumb.
Great. Um, last kind of questions I'll combine considering things like floodplains, we'll say stream buffers, driveways, VDOT, sight lines, those sorts of things. Um, Christopher, maybe talk to best process on, you know, discovering some of those things or your advice on that. So,
Yeah, they're great questions. They always need to be answered. Unless you're, county roads require VDOT entrance letters. If you're in a community, you won't necessarily need that. This is why I think you'll see so many builders, and Bramante is one of them, will begin collecting fees for pre-construction because this due diligence takes a lot of time, and builders are going to charge for it. So while there's, when I mentioned that 1 month to get confident buying a parcel, we actually have several gates in terms of commitment to Bramante. So we'll share a threshold amount of information to gain confidence. We understand that realtors may want to share several builders for a client to choose from. We would recommend that you help your clients narrow down one builder because they are at some point going to ask for fees. We try to earn that trust incrementally, but yes, as you place more trust in us, then we can spend more time making sure we're answering all those questions. I mentioned steep lots in Albemarle County. We had one that was a big question mark as to whether you could actually build a home on it. And Albemarle County has a process that says we're not gonna like prevent you from being able to build on your land, even though if you follow their rules, some parcels don't actually meet the requirements. We scheduled an engineering meeting with Albemarle County. We met with the county engineer. We made sure we brought in Bush Gale and Associates, a local prominent civil engineer. And we made sure we were planning everything really well. This is kind of an aside, but we went through the pre-construction meeting, and then we doubled back to apply for the building permit, and the engineering department had new pre-construction questions that weren't fleshed out in the first one. So it's hard to tell how much due diligence you'll need to do, and if you'll have to do it again even after you do it properly the first time.
That's great. Well, we can start wrapping up.
Can I jump in? Sorry, just real
Yeah,
quick,
sure.
because I saw that Joseph asked about like for the land loan, the floodplain. We do not run the flood. I don't know if Fulton does, but for land purchases, we do not do the flood, and we only do that for construction loans. But our appraiser does include the flood map in their appraisal report. So, but I do think that's a really good point to bring up with your buyers and making sure that that has been done or will be done. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Megan, for answering that.
That's a great point too. I think there's some pieces of land, I think to Christopher's point, where you walk on it and you're like I don't know even where you would put a house or a structure because of where the stream is or what the critical slopes are when you look at the GIS, et cetera. So it's like at that point I'm like, hey, we need to tap the big boy, the builder on the shoulder to figure this out. So well, excellent, excellent. Thank you so much to each of you for being here. Anything that we missed really briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Melissa to close us out.
Yeah, really good questions. Thanks so much for all the participation, you guys. And Teely, I agree. More people should attend these. Tell your offices. If anyone has any questions they feel like didn't get answered in the chat, feel free to just unmute and shout out.
Hi, good morning. Sorry,
Go ahead.
surprise. Questions about getting the utility company out to tell you how much it's going to cost to run the electric to the house site, and whether it's going to be underground or above ground. What's your experience with that?
Julia, did you want to take this one?
No.
I'm just having a little fun. Um, Krista, that's a really good question. And it can vary greatly. If you're working with someone like Dominion, those costs and unforeseens are going to be mitigated, although Dominion has higher usage rates. There are a variety of co-ops within the community that have supposedly more affordable consumption rates, but they will make the client pay more upfront. They will give you a price per foot for their infrastructure that needs to go in the ditch, but they oftentimes won't dig it. So we have to bring in our excavator to estimate the length of the ditch, to dig it, to backfill it, to get conduit in it for the power company to come later and pull their line through. So it can be a significant budgeting factor that you want to make sure you're paying attention to, especially if it's in a co-op electrical environment.
So I think that's a really great point that you just brought to my attention that, outside of their a buyer builder's relationship with the builder, they may have to pay the electric company directly to bring that line in.
It's true. And I think someone else asked the question about, whose responsibility is it to make sure that all boxes are checked for the property? And I mean, ultimately, the answer is the buyer. But the reason that everyone that's participating in this call this morning is here is because we want to make sure that we're guiding those clients as best we can. We're helping them ask those questions and answer them. But it can be exhausting, just how thorough and how many surprises, what angle they're coming from.
Thank you so much for answering that.
You're welcome.
We certainly deal with some buyers who are very hands-off and some who want to be very involved. In the process of purchasing land and looking to build, are there opportunities for the buyer to put in that work themselves and have what we would call on our residential side some sweat equity? And with that being said, I'm sure that the experience comes into play as well. So you want to make sure that you're doing the right things. Can you speak to, obviously, you guys have all spoken about how the owner needs to be involved. There are moving parts. But are there opportunities for people to sort of save money, or is that a little unadvisable due to perhaps they're never have built a home before?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of liability concerns there and contract structure concerns. The builder is tasked with advancing the construction of the home at all times. We have to put our contractor's license on the building permit. Um, and there are insurance policies for all the work that happens on site and the way that it happens. So our contract states that you can't do work on the home yourself unless we give you permission. Then it becomes a business decision because from time to time, yes, our clients are in the house, maybe putting in a closet system, that they wanted to provide themselves. But it can be a slippery slope. We want to be very careful that we're not opening up risks of the home taking too long, risks of the client getting in the way of a occupancy permit. We find that the best way to give the clients opportunity to provide their own sweat equity is that it's not a critical component necessary to get a certificate of occupancy. So let us complete your home, move in, and save a project for yourself for later if you want to save some money there.
Thank you.
I will say Farm Credit does have a self-build option. We do have a loan product that allows you to build your own home. It is very hard to qualify for, so they have to have a lot of experience and it's, higher interest rate, higher fees. It's a very risky loan for us, but it is something that we do offer right now. But I still recommend that nobody gets started until they've been approved because, again, if they've already started, a builder won't step in if we can't approve them, and it's just a mess. So, but we do have that as an option.
Okay.
I think we've all shown a house that someone's built themselves. So, um,
Anyone else?
I can give you my experience from my very, very first house that we were trying to save money, and the builder said, yes, we could do the painting to save us money. I'll never do it again. I walked in that house and went, oh my gosh, there's nothing painted. We wood, everything. So I don't recommend it for anybody.
Live and learn.
Changing a wall color is a lot easier than turning sheetrock into a finished surface.
Yes. Wow.
All right. Well, thank you guys for your expertise this morning and all of the great questions. And that was very informative. Good topic this morning. If anybody has anything else, otherwise, I will hand it over to Teresa to go through some upcoming opportunities at CAR.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you, Teely, for that comment. We are in the process, the Professional Development Committee is in the process right now. We're meeting on Monday and we're putting together topics for next year because we work a year in advance. So if any of you have any ideas, okay, well, we didn't touch on this, maybe we should touch on that, send it to us. Send it to education@car.com. Send us your topics, ideas, and we will definitely, it helps us, try to narrow things down. We only have so many Latte and Learns that we do a year. But if there's ever one that you think is a hot topic that needs to be addressed as soon as possible, let us know because we can always add another one to our schedule. We want to make sure that we're giving you the education that you need. So don't forget about it. Send us what you have and ideas. We love it, don't we, Melissa? So I want to thank each of you for being here today. Julia, Megan, Christopher, Josh, thanks so much for helping us. I thought it was excellent. And of course, Teely said, this is a lot of good information. It was a lot of information. I did send you the handout if you saw it this morning. So hopefully that will give you some, just a little bit of ideas and help. I ran it by the panel first to make sure that it was good information that, you could possibly use in the future. So thank you all for attending. I am going to start showing you what's coming up for those of you that cannot stay on. please feel free to go ahead and just log off. But I'm going to go through showing you what's coming up at CAR. We got a lot of things coming up and also a couple reminders. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so the first thing is, have you met your NAR requirements that's due the end of next year? We are in the cycle 8 and it started January 1st, 2025. If you're taking the classes with us at CAR, we automatically send those up. If you're not, if you're taking them outside of CAR, the CE shop, uh, who else? CE Shop, Mosley Flint, Mosley. Please send us your certificate and we will get that uploaded to NAR. Here are the Code of Ethic dates that we have for this year and also the fair housing dates. There's also a GRI in each one of those. If you had to have it, we have the GRI as well. And then with the new contract coming out on May 4th, we are trying to put together, a lot of classes. So here's the list of classes. The only one that's not confirmed is the one that we're having with VAR. They're in the process. We have them coming anyhow on the 24th, and we were going to do the new laws update, and then disclosures was the next one. And what we're trying to do is get that disclosures taken out and give us a contract update. I have reached out. It's been 2 weeks now. I'm waiting for them to get back to me. VAR sent it to the legal team. So now it's at the legal team, just waiting to hear back. But if you are wanting more information about the contract, here are the dates. We have a contract writing class. It's a 3-hour class coming up in our CE in April on the 23rd. We're also doing an updated sales contract. We moved our sales contract from February to May so that we would have the updated version and we can talk about it. And then, of course, contract essentials in July here. If anyone's interested in the Pat Jensen Leadership Academy, the enrollment started on February 2nd and it ends March 27th. So we're coming up on that deadline. If you're interested in attending, it's a great, great program, especially if if you want to go into leadership and you want to go and work with Virginia Realtors or even NAR. It's a great program. We have quite a few people on here that's already been through that program. Again, our Sweet 16, if you need your 16 hours, April 16th and April 23rd are the dates to get those. We also have an At Home with Diversity coming up at the end of April. So if you haven't taken that, it's a really great class. It's about a 6 to 7 hour class. We break for lunch and you're out by 4:30. That's going to give you also the 2 hours of fair housing that you need. If you haven't taken any of the GRI classes, which stands for Graduate of the Realtor Institute, I don't care if you've been in the business for 10, 15 years. These are really great classes. I don't think it's ever too late to start getting your GRI. All of the classes, go through different things that you need, contracts, working with buyers, working with sellers, the risk management, the escrow management is also in that. Also, they talk about the real estate law. And in our program, we also, in order to get that, you have to take the military relocation professional and the At Home with Diversity. So those are 2 certifications. When you're finished with this, which you can be finished within 1 year, you would have the GRI designation and then those 2 certifications. Our next membership meeting, we just had a wonderful membership meeting yesterday, and it was about the awards, the Honor Society. The next one is going to be about transportation. We found out, after having the transportation update for the last 2 years, that this is something that's very valuable and that we should probably touch on every year. So we keep it in our schedule. But we're going to have Neil again as the moderator, and of course, VDOT's going to be there and some of the others. After that, we have a CE class, and this is a brand new class for us. It's called Serving Seniors. We got this approved for 1 hour of real estate related, and Donna Patton's going to teach that for us. So come out and learn a little bit more about serving seniors. After working with my mom and selling her townhouse, yeah, it's valuable. Latte and Learn, our next one is on May 15th. Crozet Downtown Initiative. We have Lee that's coming out. We also have another person that's we're going to put in there. They're going to be talking about one of the buildings there that's being renovated. She hasn't really got back to me, so I don't know if that's really going to happen or not, Melissa, but we've been working on that. There's our sales contract that's coming up on May 21st, if you're interested. And then working with sellers. Um, it's devoted to working with sellers. We just had working with buyers, and now June 22nd, we're going to do working with sellers. And as we talked about earlier, the new laws with VAR, that's going to be on the 24th of June. And hopefully we'll have that contract in there. And then again, we do the Sweet 16 in July. And then in the August timeframe, we have VAR coming back, and they're going to do an advertising for brokers and then ethics and the risk of AI. So, a lot of good information coming up for the summer. A lot of classes going on. So, ideas are always great if you can send them to us. But that's all I have to show you today. And again, we thank you for attending. We like the Latte and Learns too. I think you get a lot out of them. Yeah, you don't get credit, but I think the information is valuable without having credit. So anybody have any questions for me?
You get Professional Honor Society credit for attending.
Yes, you do. Yes. Very good. Anybody else? Okay, well, thank you again for attending. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Julia. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Happy first day of spring.
Yes. Happy spring.